Hey leaders, in this episode, Lorna and I are going to tackle a question often posed to us regarding the collaborative team meeting. How do we plan to follow up on the actions that are determined during the course of the meeting? How do we ensure that actions are being accomplished and if they are actually having an impact on teacher practice and student learning? We plan to reflect on these questions and offer you a number of strategies and considerations in relation to the question of follow-up. So, let's get started.
Leading organizations with intentionality and purpose is complex work, and dedicated leaders work tirelessly each and every day to build impactful cultures of collaboration. But effective collaboration is difficult and messy. The good news is you don't have to do it alone. Join the Jigsaw Learning team for leading collaborative response, sharing insights for leaders committed to establishing, refining, and deepening collaborative response in their organization.
Welcome back to episode 35 of the Leading Collaborative Response podcast. I'm Lorna Hewson, lead learner and co-founder of Jigsaw Learning. And
I'm Kurtis Hewson, ditto. So in this episode, we want to focus on the question of how to follow up on actions from collaborative team meetings. We're going to review the process that generates the actions for our team members, and then offer a number of different ways that we or other schools and leaders have ensured follow-up on actions from collaborative team meetings. So we know we want to engage in rich conversations, rich discussions in these collaborative team meetings. We want to determine actions, but then how do we follow up? It's a question posed to us quite often, and we have people say, if these collaborative team meetings are 3 to 5 weeks apart, like you suggest, that's a long time to wait before we follow up. And our response is, you probably don't want to use the next meeting as the sole way to follow up, nor do we want to take inordinate amount of time at that next meeting to say, well, let's take 20 minutes and Lorna, did you do this? Kurtis, did you do this? And you go, that was 5 weeks ago.
Frankly,
I can't remember.
I would have forgotten by then.
Yeah, and we hear that often. And so people sometimes get a little bit frustrated when they ask the question of how do we follow up? And the response back is, well, it depends. It depends on your school. It depends on how you're structured. But we can share a number of ways that we've seen people follow up really, really effectively. So before we go to the follow-up, let's review that key issue process. One of the keys in the collaborative team meeting through that key issue process is it puts the staff in direct ownership of what is the action I commit to doing. So can you describe once again what that looks like?
So a teacher will identify a key issue, and then through facilitation, the facilitator will ask a few questions to refine that, because we want to make sure that if it's not too broad, that it would encompass everything, and then we can't really discuss anything.
Yeah. Or
too narrow that we end up just talking about that one child. But that's a topic for another show. But the facilitator will help the group to arrive at a key issue. And then we take the onus off or the focus off of the student and off of the teacher.
And before that, we want to attach other students, so it's not just this student's key issue or just this teacher.
Right.
That others are, me too. I have a student that also has that key issue.
Yeah, but then we remove the idea of the teachers and the students, and then really focus on what is the key issue and what are some ideas of how to address that key issue. And those can be ideas that you're currently using. They can be ideas that you've seen, that you've tried in the past, that you've seen someone else do. It's just absolutely that beautiful brainstorm of everything that you can possibly think of that might address that key issue.
Yeah, and at that point, we also want to, if we've reached this point in the process or in the framework, to be referring to our continuum of supports to say, is there anything that we've done successfully in the past that we could apply? And I often say, we want to hear words like what if, and I wonder if, because when you share an idea, I want to be able to piggyback and go, that's awesome. What if, and maybe tweak it, maybe extend it. And it's so important during that process that nobody's saying, oh, that wouldn't work, or, oh, I've tried that before. No, we're just brainstorming.
And we want to just bounce ideas off of each other and grow each other's ideas and be able to collect those all in one place so that we've got a number of different ideas that are possibilities for us to try.
Right. Then me as facilitator comes back and says, so Lorna, for the student that you were thinking, what's one thing that you want to try? And you commit to an action.
Yes, and the beautiful thing about that is that, first of all, I can choose something that is within my realm of experience or my learning curve. I can handle that fine as a teacher, but also I get to choose something that I think is going to be best suited for the student that I have brought forward.
Or for the course material you're teaching. It still leaves the professionalism with the teacher. But we've seen over and over again that in time, as people get comfortable, as you build up high degrees of vulnerability, you'll see people stretch. You'll see them try things that they may not have tried in the past. You'll hear things like, I really like your idea, Lorna, but I'm going to need some help. Can you show me what that looks like? So we commit to these actions. So let's say in a collaborative team meeting, we've engaged in 3 or 4 key issue conversations. And as a result, I'm walking away with 3 or 4 next steps that I've committed to. You have as well. Other people have. This is where the question arises of who follows up. How do we ensure that if I committed to doing this thing for this student in my classroom, where's the accountability for that to get completed?
Yeah, so there's so many different ways that we can create follow-up and connection to the ongoing work that happens, that it's not just about that collaborative team meeting and the conversation, but the whole point is that we're walking away and actually doing something for our students.
We're actioning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So one thing we can do is really tie that to a principal or an administrator who does their walkthroughs. And when they go through the classroom, to be able to talk with the teacher about the actions and have a copy of those actions from the last meeting, to be able to say, so did you try this for this student? How did that go?
Yeah.
Do you need some help in ensuring that that moves forward? Are there some adjustments that we want to make to that particular strategy that you are trying? But really, it's that nice conversation that can happen in the classrooms about how did those actions go, and do you need any help to be able to support you with that?
This was actually one of my favorite strategies to be able to follow up as a principal, because it gave me, when I'm coming into your classroom, I'm coming with a very focused, direct purpose to be able to say, you were going to try a visual schedule. Can you show me what that looks like? How did that work? How did that go along? And so I'm following up. So I saw something similar with this in a small school where their learning support teacher or inclusion coach or whatever you want to refer to that role, they had set up that person had regular timetabled blocks with each connections with each teacher in the school, and it had been put onto their tasks that 2 weeks later, in your naturally occurring connection, you're having that conversation of, here's something that you tried. How did it go? What did it look like? How can I help? So I think there's multiple ways to have that follow up. I've also seen where at the meeting, you determine an action, but then the next column in the notes is who's going to follow up with you on that action. So for instance, it might be that you've determined, let's use that visual schedule idea. You're going to try a visual schedule, but I'm responsible for checking in to see how that went. How did that go? And again, the idea in this school is that they were trying to continue to prompt colleague to colleague conversations. And they might, I could imagine, I didn't see this, but it would make a logical next step of whoever's following up should be someone who's really well suited or purposed for that. Maybe the follow-up is someone who already uses a visual schedule really effectively in their classroom, and they'll come in case you've tried and it hasn't worked. Maybe I have some wisdom that I can impart in that. So that follow-up for whether it's an administrator, a other role, or someone you've identified right in the meeting to engage in that. What else have we seen? We'll be right back to continue this episode.
In the spring, we often find ourselves stretched between two worlds, with one foot in the year wrapping up and the other foot in the year to come. This messy middle presents many challenges, but also provides opportunities to learn from the past and plan for the future. Join us for the online workshop, Planning for Fall Startup, Re-engaging Collaborative Response, part of our Supporting Collaborative Response series. In this on-demand workshop, I will share 5 ways to reflect on learnings from the current school year and 5 considerations for planning for the new year. I'll also be sharing numerous resources, templates, and samples that will support you in your learning. Access this on-demand workshop and you'll have the ability to view, replay any or all of the workshop when it best fits your time. Register today to learn more about how the fall startup can be an excellent opportunity to re-energize your school's collaborative response efforts.
And now back to our conversation.
So another one is that we focus the next time we come together in a collaborative team meeting, we focus our celebrations on the actions that we have put in place so that everyone who has walked away with an action can then come forward in the celebrations with, this is what we can celebrate from the action that I had tried with a particular student.
So making that connection.
Making that direct
We've
link.
seen that lots.
Yeah.
I think also I have seen a school where it was part of their process that the expectation was prior to the next meeting, you go into the previous meeting and just write a reflection. They had put it right into their meeting notes, a quick reflection on how that went. I've also seen another school where one of their leads would go and copy the actions, put it into the next meeting's agenda, and then leave a space for people to put a reflection. People were expected to go ahead of time and just fill in some quick reflections. And then in the meeting, rather than going through each individual actions, they would turn and say, Lorna, from any of the reflections, do you have a question for a colleague? Anything that you'd like to see? And again, I could easily see that if I said I'd try a visual schedule, when I put my reflection, who knows, I might even pop a picture in of what that looks like. Or if you said that you were going to search out a website to be able to utilize with a student, maybe you've put a link to that website right in. Again, it's all about building each other's toolboxes and sharing. I like that.
Yeah.
That way that they were doing that within that school.
Another great opportunity, of course, is using your staff meetings or your PD days to be able to reflect on the actions that you are trying in your classroom. And so having time to be able to say, okay, we're going to do some sharing today during our staff meeting time and share one thing that you have tried that has been successful from the actions of our collaborative team meeting.
I actually saw this explicitly on a PD day where the leadership had purposefully put mixed groups up. They were up on a screen and said, we'd like for you to take 5 minutes, go into your last collaborative team meeting, pull out one action that you want to speak to, and in 5 minutes, you're going to go into these mixed groups and you're expected to share what did you do, what have you learned, how did it work?
Yeah,
so
that's
I love
great.
That.
The other connected piece is thinking about that collaborative planning time. And during your collaborative planning time, having a part of that consistent meeting time, being able to review your actions. So as a grade level team, as a division team, you're meeting to look at instructional practice through that collaborative planning, but having a portion of that meeting time, being able to reflect on the actions that you have followed up on with your collaborative
So I could see
meeting.
that built right in. Let's say, for instance, I had weekly time embedded for teams where 2 weeks after a collaborative team meeting, it's expected that you'll take 10 minutes of that planning time to reflect. And I think this works whether it's the same team that met in the collaborative team meeting or if it was different. In fact,
Doesn't matter.
I could see power in it being different.
Because
you
for
could say,
sure.
well, in my meeting we discussed this, and it might prompt a, that's interesting. what were some other ideas
Yeah.
that came up with
Yeah,
that?
another level of sharing, that scaffolded sharing that happens between colleagues. Yeah.
So obviously
Love it.
we see with some of the shared doc tools that people have, whether they're Google Docs or Microsoft shared documents, we see people putting, inserting comments that with this action, I'm going to tag you so that you'll get an email. And then the expectation is you'll go and mark completed. I mean, that's another way to be able to do that, so that at the end of the meeting, you might have 4 emails waiting for you of 4 different places you were specifically tagged. And this is the exact purpose of our WeCollab software. And we'll throw some information in the show notes about this. The WeCollab is intended to be, let's document the actions that we have, and then at the end of the meeting, you get a set of notes, and the actions that happen, I get a set actions. We go in, we're able to click off, have we completed them, add a comment if we wish, and then that just keeps rolling with the students, so that a student profile over time can really, really demonstrate what have we done for support, what's worked and what hasn't.
Well, and that's one of the beautiful things about that software is that it's building that student profile over time, plus allowing us to document all of our meetings and the actions that are going out for individual students as well.
So I had shared this with you just recently, but obviously our listeners and viewers haven't heard this, but I was at a school recently where they had a board within their meeting space. It was a magnetic whiteboard. What they would do is in their meetings, they would pull up a template, and we'll make sure the template is shared in the show notes as well, that they could write the key issue and then document all the things that they could try. Okay, that went on there. And then when it came to assigning action, each grade level had a different color of sticky note that was assigned to them for the year. And we would write on that for this key issue, here's all the ideas. And you would write down, I've got Ezra, and here's the one thing that I'm going to try. And then they would stick it physically on that and put it up on the board. So to look at the board visually, you saw probably, I'd say about 36 at the time, different key issues, how you could solve them, but then these smatterings of sticky notes. And then what they said is every week, after the collaborative team meeting, they would take a short portion after school and go in and do a review. And if there's any that they see for their students that either the strategy has worked or I'm not seeing this as a key issue anymore, they go and put the sticky note on the back of the paper. And I thought it was a brilliant way to even visually show how do we follow up on actions, how many students are we seeing, and then imagine at the end of the year being able to turn those over and just seeing how many things have we tried that have worked for students.
A great visual that demonstrates the things that are happening for students.
Well, and one of the teachers said one of the powers for that person was they can go in and survey anytime I'm struggling with something in my classroom. I don't have to wait for the next meeting 3 weeks away. I go in and see what's already happening. And then I might even see a student with a teacher there. I might go have a conversation with that person because I want to hear, how's this working?
How did that
I
work?
haven't heard of this particular strategy that you're going to try, and I'd like to learn more.
Yeah, that makes it very student specific and creates that connection between teachers too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. That's great. Well, Kurtis, I have a question for you, which is a little tricky question to answer, but here goes. Knowing what you know now, how would you follow up on actions if you were back leading a school again?
We'll be right back to continue this episode.
Feeling overwhelmed with the expectations being placed on teachers, leaders, and educational systems to respond to the diverse needs of our learners?
Are you wanting to take your PLCs and RTI efforts to the next level?
It definitely takes a highly coordinated framework of structures and processes to maximize the collective capacity of your team to ensure success for all students. Collaborative Response is that framework.
Order your copy of our bestseller, Collaborative Response, 3 foundational components that transform how we respond to the needs of learners, which includes access to a comprehensive companion website, Join the thousands of schools using the framework to ensure high levels of success for students and staff. And now back to our conversation. Yeah, okay. So I mentioned before, I really liked as a principal, being able to go in with the notes and engage in a conversation. I think I would still do that, but what I think I would want to try and build in is make it part of a system and a structure so that it's not reliant upon me as an administrator to follow up, which sometimes can feel that it's lending itself on a positional authority. And I know it's part of instructional leadership, so that's valuable. But I almost like the opportunities for colleagues to hold themselves accountable and learn through that process. So I think I would actually absolutely set it up as just part of our system, so that when we have collaborative planning, the expectation in our schedule of collaborative planning, when it's the 2 weeks after the scheduled collaborative team meeting, there's a portion embedded just as our natural, normal structure, that this is where you review your actions with one another. And I think it would be even more powerful if I'm in collaborative planning with people I share a teaching experience with, either in relation to the grade or age of students or in relation to the subject area that we're teaching. And then in the collaborative team meetings, we could mix people up. I think that layering of collaboration would be so valuable, and then just make it a part of the regular ongoing structure of, in this conversation, we brainstorm, we envision, and we commit. And then in the next part of our process, we reflect and determine next steps, and then just keep repeating and cycling it. Again, systems. How can we build systems that are not necessarily putting that responsibility onto a single individual?
Yeah, and that creates that fluid nature between what we're doing in every different layer of meeting, and that it's very intentional in the purpose overall,
and the alignment of it as well.
Yeah.
So we hope that this has provided some ideas, some thoughts around follow-up, and again, recognizing, as I shared right off the bat, that there's probably not one way that you go about doing this. It's envisioning what works best within your own school context. So if you want to learn more about the key issue process, the collaborative team meeting, please use the book code that we'll put down, or the coupon code that we'll put in the show notes. It'll get you 10% off the book. We ask, once again, subscribe to the podcast if this is of value to you. Share it out with one friend, and please reach out if you have ideas on that you've explored and found really effective.
We'd love to
for
hear
following
it.
up. We absolutely would. So once again, thank you so much to everyone, and we look forward to connecting again in the future.
See you soon.
For more on collaborative response, visit jigsawlearning.ca or join the JL Insider to receive access to newly added resources and content.